any fucking brick around here, do you? I'm talking to you!
Fuck brick then. Let's cut a new deal.
Ha! Now that's good business sense.
Sun is down, freezing cold.
Nothing beats getting truly immersed in a game you're excited for. After multiple delays, Cyberpunk 2077 is finally out, and there are so many things you can do. You can go on heists for various criminal groups, build up your arsenal for the best weapons and outfits, explore the massive open world that's brimming with beautiful dystopian... Did that car just... Can you roll that back? Yep. Looking at the frame by frame, it literally just spawned out of thin air before I could even react to it. Lovely. Wait. What was I just talking about? Sorry, I got kind of sidetracked by how fucking broken the game is! That moment is a perfect microcosm of the experience you're likely to have with Cyberpunk. You'll be having fun and getting invested, then something will go wrong and you'll be taken out of the experience. An occasional glitch here and there is something you can usually give a pass on, but these things happen so often during my playthrough that it's actually harder to find clips where nothing goes wrong than it is to find the ones with problems. However, I shall go into detail with that later, for one particular reason: the inconsistency of these bugs between different systems and players. Weaponized Nerd Rage, for example, experienced almost no issues regarding bugs during his playthrough on PC, and Fetusberry Crunch consulted on this review for the PS4 version, citing only a couple crashes over 30 hours of play and little else of note. With that in mind, I shall discuss the game for the moment as if I did not experience constant bugs, and demonstrate that even when working exactly as intended, Cyberpunk 2077 is still a poorly executed title. In this game, you play as V, whom, through circumstances that vary based on your choice of background, eventually become a career criminal, pulling heists and taking on jobs from whoever's willing to pay. Once the 5-hour prologue is complete, yes, you heard me right, you are basically free to go anywhere you want and do as you please outside of story missions. People who have played other open-world action games like GTA or Saints Row will feel right at home as far as how the world operates. You can go start fights with other criminals, steal cars, do side quests, etc. However, the game presents itself as being similar, if not a good competitor, to GTA, while having some glaring holes in its general design. Take for example this interaction, where I intentionally try to start a cop chase, at the time wanting some B-roll for this very video. The cops arrive, but by spawning out of thin air outside my field of view. Surrounded and being attacked, I decide to flee and get ready for a fun, action-packed chase, which never happened. That's right, these cops don't try and chase you down once you go further than a block, and if you go outside their line of sight by a couple of blocks, they despawn, and the wanted level resets. So in this game about being a criminal in the open world, there are no cop chases. And you can escape so easily that it's not even worth it to try and fight them. Even attacking the cops directly won't encourage them to get in a car and chase after you. GTA isn't the most immersive or realistic game, let's be honest, but even San Andreas from 2004 has the police actually show up in a vehicle and proceed to give chase once you try to flee. You'll see me bring up other games often in this review, and I think it's important to compare a game to its peers if it's going to compete in this genre. That isn't to say Cyberpunk needs to be better in every way compared to GTA or RPGs in general, but it's been tooting its own horn for years now, so if I don't take their word at face value, what else would I have to go on? The game talks about a big immersive world, but honestly I found it kind of empty feeling. This can be demonstrated with the admittedly minor aspect of food vendors you can visit on the streets. Now when I say can visit, I mean the special ones with the store icon over their head. Most people making food don't actually sell any to you, and will often just blurt out a random line of dialogue as if they were any other pedestrian NPC. This alone isn't some cardinal sin, but that doesn't make me feel like I am some street punk socializing among the people I'm fighting the good fight for. Feels like they didn't program unique dialogue for NPCs who stand near their own hot dog stands, so now they are window dressing at best. An open world needs to feel fun to explore and move around in. And that lack of immersion, as well as player choice, is found in many places outside of just a food cart. With that in mind, let's discuss the aspect of player freedom and how Cyberpunk surprisingly falls flat in that regard. While somewhat minor, many of these games give you the option to customize your character while you play through the game, like a barber or tattoo shops. Oddly, this game has neither of them, which I find exceptionally bizarre given that nobody in this game has a normal haircut, and almost everyone you meet has tattoos. As with other games in the genre, you mainly get around by driving, and the handling on vehicles is rough to say the least. I would highly recommend a controller for this, as the mouse and keyboard driving was very finicky, and this wasn't helped by the lack of a few quality of life features regarding the minimap and setting a GPS. For one, the map doesn't zoom out when you get in a car, so you normally don't see what turn you need to take until you are almost at the intersection already, causing you to overshoot often. If we look at a game like Sleeping Dogs from 2012, another game in the genre, they had this issue taken care of with very minor touches. The map zooms out when driving, letting you see where you need to go well ahead of time, and these handy arrows show up at the intersections you need to take a turn at, meaning you can actually drive without needing to look at the map at all after you set your destination. This irks me as a moment of missed potential, because we have a game released right when Cyberpunk began development, with no sci-fi elements and no in-game explanation for how an arrow just appears out of nowhere to show you the way. And it has this feature regardless, because it's useful for a good gameplay experience. Meanwhile, the game where you have augmented reality technology implanted in your fucking eyeballs, an aspect of the world that would easily let you put in all sorts of off-the-wall crazy shit, doesn't think holograms showing you where to drive would be useful. Hell, the races in this game actually code the road directly so you know where to go, and they didn't think that would be a useful feature for the GPS in general. I guess knowing the immediate effects of drinking or selling a single can of soda has more benefit to your character. On the topic of vehicles, you cannot customize or upgrade them at all. They are exactly as you find them, no paint, no progression. Stealing cars is also an oddly inefficient way to travel, as there is no method to keep any car that you steal, and they can despawn when they are out of your sight line. What, you think you can keep a car you stole? That's illegal, go buy one, you lowlife! Additionally, cars that you purchase can be summoned from basically anywhere with a single button, so it's easier to do that instead. One of the fastest cars in the game can be obtained for free within a story mission as well. So the prospect of stealing a car that is slower than one you already have, and also attracting police attention in the process, seems particularly ass backwards, unless you're picking a fight with cops for fun. Speaking of fights, combat could have been a highlight of the game if not for how finicky it can be. Gunplay is solid, but leans heavily on your stats mixed with the gun stats, this being an RPG after all. This could lead to circumstances where you shoot someone 5 times in the head and they don't even flinch, but they one-shot you without hesitation. This happens the most with enemies that have a skull icon over their head, as that is a sign that they are too strong for you to defeat right now. What I find irksome is that the game doesn't tell you how much stronger they are in comparison to you, just that they are too strong. Enemies and missions don't have a recommended level attached to them, just descriptions like very dangerous in red for missions you can't beat, or low risk in gray for things you can win in your sleep. I won't know how strong I need to be in order to tackle this mission unless I keep going back to it after leveling up a few times and checking if it changed color. Regarding how I personally played the game, I enjoy myself a good bit of boxing, so I decided to do a melee-only build. This turned out to be extremely broken in my favor, allowing me to take out rooms full of gang members wielding shotguns by punching all of them to death. If you get your stats in order like I did, single quick punches are enough to stun enemies and do huge damage, allowing you to either finish them off while they stumble around helplessly, or go punch another person until the whole room is full of people who can't move. You can even get an augment called Gorilla Arms, which makes your punches even more powerful, and lets you add mods to it like this one, which sets them on fire. Combat isn't the only way to go though, as the game allows for stealth and non-lethal approaches to gameplay, with hacking being a very powerful tool in this playstyle. Most enemies have implants, which allow for quick hacks, a skill where you can instantly apply effects to opponents and the environment within your line of sight. This ranges from disabling their eyes, turning off cameras, seeing enemies through the walls, making otherwise innocuous machines in the room turn on to create a distraction, so on and so forth. My first playthrough was almost exclusively melee combat focused, but my second run is a new character, focused mainly on handguns and hacks, which was much more productive for discrete gameplay in comparison. Regarding how you build your character, the leveling system works like this. Each trait has its own number, ranging from 1 to 20, which influences different stats. Within each of these 5 stats, you have subgroups of skills that correlate with it, and you can spend points to gain unique perks within those skill sets. My character punched a lot, so I got a lot of points towards Street Brawler, which helped for increasing punch damage and reducing stamina usage. Keep in mind that how often you use a playstyle will determine which perks are available to unlock. For example, running a lot gets you athlete experience, hacking gets you hack experience, etc. I ran into a situation where I wanted to start crafting rare items, but I didn't have the crafting experience to do so, and since my body stat was 17 compared to engineering at only 4, it was definitely too late to try other playstyles. While the character building aspect is fine, I'll say that I have a general issue with the lack of choices in the game, especially with the story missions. You can choose which order to play them in, and you can make choices within those missions, but overall they have no bearing on anything outside of the moment. Dialogue also doesn't play much into how things turn out for missions, and they don't have consequences either. I had this later game mission which could have ended in 2 ways. 1, I end up getting the group I'm assisting killed due to negligence on my part, or 2, I avoid said negligence, but then the group tries to kill me anyways. The result is the same, everyone in that location dies, so I don't feel like I made a difference or like I have any agency. This would be fine in the case of a more linear action game, but Cyberpunk is being sold on its player freedom and the impact of your choices. To compare this to another RPG where you can choose the origin of your character, let's use Tyranny for demonstration. In Cyberpunk, you get 3 options for a starting point, and this has 2 effects. The starting mission of the game that leads to the same prologue regardless, and some extra dialogue options in certain story missions that don't typically affect the outcome of the conversation. In Tyranny, you can create a backstory through an interactive story of choices that take place before the events of the game, and these choices affect the world at large, as well as changes the disposition characters have towards you, up to and including scenarios that completely change the outcome of story missions. You may even have entire mission paths opened or closed to you based on these choices, as some locations get destroyed depending on what you decided. When comparing these games side by side, you can plainly tell that one game has choices which matter, and the other wishes it did. Tying this into other aspects I've discussed and putting it bluntly, we are talking about an open-world RPG where you play as a thief, but you can't change your character past the creation screen, your choices don't change the outcome of most of the story, and as mentioned earlier, your vehicles are all bought instead of stolen, nor can they be changed or upgraded in any way. The only changes you can make plot-wise are the endings, and almost all the things that have an impact on the ending happen during the final mission, which means everything you did before that moment has no sway on the outcome. Did you do what I did and punch everyone to death, disregarding stealth and non-lethal options? Or did you do a pacifist run, avoiding detection and keeping things clean as possible? Side quests, friendly NPCs, relationships with rival factions, all of which can be different from my playthrough and yours. They do fuck all as far as where you end up. For what it's worth, the story and its characters are probably the best thing this game has going for it right now. Yet, I feel like the story beats don't complement the gameplay involved, and that this is all with the caveat that the game is working as intended. This is a big caveat because, as I alluded to before, this game is a fucking mess. Graphical glitches are one thing, but the lack of polish affects gameplay as well. People and vehicles will spawn in and out of the world.
Goodbye, my son.
Enemies and NPCs will phase through or be stuck in walls. Weapons will be invisible or even clip through the floor. It never ends. Enemy hitboxes are weird and inconsistent, especially in hand-to-hand combat. Sound glitches were the worst for taking me out of the world, like this near-silent car chase.
Fucking drive, Jackie!
or when I punch a dude to death with the knockout animation and it doesn't make a sound when the fist connects. It was not uncommon for the game to just get stuck on different cutscenes or set pieces and require me to reload to a prior save just to progress. Sometimes the game would just not recognize certain keys being pressed during gameplay, such as when I would press the middle mouse button to heal, and it never would, due to a repeatable bug where any arm implants make the blood pump unusable despite the game not saying otherwise. A really bad case had the up and down buttons decide that they don't exist when trying to select dialogue options. The game crashed on me often, a total of 27 times over the course of my run through the story and side quests. Performance at launch was genuinely awful. My computer's no slouch when it comes to consumer hardware, so playing this on medium settings should at least be able to put out a consistent 60 frames per second at 1080p. Yet it struggled to do that often.
Run, Johnny, like the wind.
Smasher.
The 1.05 patch helped tremendously in this regard, even if they are lying through their teeth regarding the explanation as to why. Here's a side-by-side of pre-1.05 and post-1.05, allowing me to play on ultra settings with almost consistent 60.
Yo, Mr. V, a pleasure.
Dexter Deshawn in the flesh. Ample indeed.
Let's roll. Mind if I ask you something right off the bangle? Would you rather live in peace as Mr. Nobody, die ripe, old, and smelling slightly of urine, or go down for all times in a blaze of glory, smelling near like posies, without seeing your 30th?
You're either somebody or you fizzle out into nothing. Night City don't let you choose.
Oh, but it does. See, in my line of work, I choose to be Mr. Chill.
For those wanting to play with any ray tracing on, please turn on DLSS if you can, because ray tracing without it is basically impossible if you want it to run well, even on top-end consumer hardware. Regarding patches, the 1.06 patch addressed an issue where if you had a save file go over 8 megabytes, it would corrupt and be unreadable. Now, what makes the file size go up in Cyberpunk 2077, you might ask? Story progress and crafting. That's right, playing the game as intended and using one of its own systems would cause it to be unplayable. The response from CD Projekt Red to this issue before the patch was, and I'm not shitting you, stop playing the game for so long. They said the game wasn't meant to be played for long periods of time, and that you shouldn't expect that from the game. I wish I was joking. It's actually astounding that they don't want you to play this open world RPG outside of the main quests. Do I even need to bring up that RPGs are meant to be played for this long? It's a selling point for most people who look at the cost of a game. Something like, how long is this game? Is it worth the price? Is an extremely common question for someone looking at any game, especially a AAA RPG. I'll say this though, I hope this game gets many patches and updates, because I want to love it, but I can't due to the technical issues always dragging me out of it. Balancing of difficulty needs work, as I played on normal and regularly was getting hit due to the unga bunga style of punching only, yet I usually had over 40 or more health kits through most of the game. And I never purchased a single one. Simply scrounging them up from defeated enemies was enough to keep me from ever being in a tough situation. Oversights on other issues can be problematic as well and should be fixed. For example, you can buy many cans of soda, disassemble them for their components, then sell those components at a profit. Rinse and repeat, and you get large sums of money relatively quickly without any risk of death. This method was actually more cost and time effective than doing side missions and gigs, which basically made me ask the question of why should I do that when this is easier? A mission might give you 1 or 2,000 if you are lucky, but I got almost 100,000 euro dollars in less than 30 minutes just scrapping cans. If you want to get the best guns and cars at over 100,000 each, you'll either have to play for longer than the devs recommend or use this exploit. My legendary gorilla arms cost that much, and it was well worth the price. Until I realized it was nearly useless against the boxing champion boss side quest, which had me only dealing 1% of his health on a charged heavy punch. When I can beat the final boss in less than 5 punches, but over 20 heavy punches barely got a scratch on him, you can tell that some things need work. Also, he got himself stuck like this often, which took all the air of intimidation right out of the room. Cyberpunk might be a great game one day, but currently it is not worth the money. I may come back in a year or so and do a Where Are They Now update on the game, similar to how I approached No Man's Sky after multiple years of it being basically worthless. But I don't think that should be an excuse for a launch as bad as this. Give us some player freedom, fix the bug and glitches, maybe I'll want to try it again someday. Hell, maybe they can work on getting the previously cut content into the game. Footage before launch had shown that the cutscenes were originally going to be in third person, which makes more sense given the character creator, and more advanced parkour involving wall runs and arm plants was even a feature. Maybe I could be excited again if we see them take strides to improve the core experience, but until then, I'd give this one a pass.
Come on now! Let's talk! You're a brick. I'm a brick. Royce did this. Piece of fuck.
Been in here a while?
A few days. Kinda lost count.